We want to welcome Joanne Godoy. She's the CEO of Radical Partners. So I'm going to pass it to you, Joanne, for you to introduce yourself and get us started in the budgeting workshop today.
Thank you, Lou. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm out here laughing about all of your reactions and how we feel about budget. So for those of you who are in the 0 to 2s about budgeting, I have some comforting words for you, which are that I'm a psychologist and math was the only class that I failed in school. And here I am teaching about budgeting. So those are some words of consolation for those of you in the lows. And then for those of you in the highs, I would hope that whatever we're going to present here today is going to make your life easier, right? In terms of simplifying some of the tools that you might be using, and that you find a tip or two that you can incorporate into your mastering budgeting. But as Luisana was saying at the beginning, if at some point you feel compelled to add something because we missed it, or you think that you have a best practice, by all means, raise your hand and we'll make the room for you to share that best practice with everybody in the room. So on that note, let's ground ourselves again, right? Because Luisana shared a lot of information about Miami Open for Business, but this is basically workshop number 3 that we are teaching, right? We started with theory of change and project planning to kind of think of the big picture of your organization. And now we're going into fundraising. And some people ask, why is budgeting part of fundraising, right? And you would be surprised of the amount of organizations that are asking for money and they don't know how much they need or for what they need it, right? So budgeting, if you want to be a successful fundraiser and you want to scale your organization, you need to have a strong budget. And just as we always say at Radical Partners, when it comes to your story and when it comes to your brand, if you are not designing and tailoring that, someone else is making the decision for you, right? So if you don't know how much money you need and what you need it for, you're allowing yourselves for your donors to decide how much your salary will be, how much a program should cost, right? So you need to have those numbers in place in order to proceed with all the other things. So this is only part 1 of these 2-part fundraising strategies workshop. So today we're going to talk about mindset and budgeting, and then part 2, which Luisana will share more later, is going to be in September, right? So this is what we're going to be doing today, talking about numbers and the basics of numbers. So before we get started, I know that some of you already have it in that email that Lou sent. We're sharing the link here in the chat as well, or you could see it on the screen. We need you to please download or copy this document. So if you're familiar with Drive, go to this link and copy the file and build your own so that you can start playing as we go along in this workshop. If you are not very familiar with Drive, you can go to that link and click on file and download that document into your computer for it to be an Excel doc. So we're giving you 31 seconds, or like 30 seconds or 1 minute of awkward silence for you to get this file into your computer. And if you don't know how to do it, please leverage the chat, and Charlotte is more than happy to guide you through that. Okay, and for those of you who are ready, if you can start sharing some thumbs up so that we can start assessing if the majority, okay. I see you, Andrea. Thank you for your thumbs up. Chantel, Pauline, Rosemary, Jennifer. Okay. Okay, Tanya, Fed, I see you. I need a few more thumbs up and then we'll continue. Okay, Kat, I see you. Okay. So Corina, it opened Google Sheets, right? So if you are familiar with Google Sheets, if you can click on file, make a copy. So that will import a document into your drive and then you can play with that. If you want to have it in your computer, you again, click file, you download the document, and then you'll have an Excel doc in your computer. And you have a few minutes to keep doing that, because we want to make sure that you all have your spreadsheets, but we're going to put it on the side for a bit, because I'm going to start referencing one of Radical Partners alum. Her name is Felicia Hatcher. And Tanya, this will be familiar to you, because in one of the last workshops that she gave at Radical Partners, she said that for whatever you want to do in life, right, you need to have these three things: the right mindset, the right skill set, and the right toolkit for you to be able to become a genius or an expert in certain things, right? So today, we're going to be focusing on your mindset and on your skill set for you to become a good fundraiser. And it's on workshop 2 that we will give you some toolkits. So Lou, if you can move us along to the next one. So talking about mindset, so for some of you, these will be reminders, and for some of you, this will be new information. But we like to think of fundraising as dating. Because if you are a fundraiser, you have to be a good date. And what does that mean, right? For those of you who have been married for a while, here are some refreshers. That investment that people are making in you is just the beginning of a relationship, not the end. Right? So when people decide to invest $2,500, $5K, $100K in your organization, that's not the culmination of something. It might be of that grant that you apply to, but it's not the end of that relationship, right? It's only the beginning. So then it is highly presumptuous to expect a gift on that first date when you meet a donor. So you cannot expect that they're going to keep giving you money without you nurturing that relationship and feeding them into what is happening, how are you doing, what is their organization up to. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is that sometimes it's better to walk away, right? Think of that first date, it went awful. You could have awkward conversations with certain funders, or when you see the application, you know that it's going to take you 2 weeks to get that. So sometimes it's better to walk away from that money. I will share later that there's no such thing as free money, right? This is an exchange. And therefore, you need to understand what the risks and the liabilities might be for you to get that money. So just like on certain dates, some investors want to kiss and tell. Others do not. So make sure you know. And what that means is that some funders want to see shout outs, right? Want the visibility. They want to be thanked publicly. Some others hate it, right? Some of them don't want that, are not interested in it. So you need to make sure that you understand what their love language is so that you don't give too less or too much of that love language. And then last but not least, we mean it when we say that you should try to be the best partner that funders have ever had, right? You don't want to be just one of the 50 that they're funding, because if you're lucky, they might introduce you to their friends, right? Remember, this is an exchange, as I've repeated several times. So if you tell them, this is what I've been doing, this is what we've been doing together, thanks to your money, thanks to my effort and my expertise. So ideally, they not only want to be a recurring donor for you, but they might introduce you to other folks. So this is just like the starter of thinking of fundraising as dating, so that you find that playfulness of it and understand that you not only want to be liked by people, but that you also want to like funders back. So we have a few things so that we can start changing your mindset around fundraising and moving from that scarcity and that fearful mindset into an abundant one and a more playful one, if this is the career that you've chosen. So I'm going to start with mindset shift number 1, right? That is just repeating what I said. This is not a one-way exchange from one way to the other. This is a 2-way exchange. I get something from you, you get something from me, but we both have to give in this equation. And that balances that relationship of power that the world has, right? That people with money have more power in this equation. You bring in something that they want, you bring in something that they need, and you might bring in something that they don't know how to do, right? So you're not begging for anything, you're asking for an investment so that you can together achieve a certain outcome, right? Number two, we hear this so often in the nonprofit world. I would do it for free, so if I have to, I will. We're so committed to our organizations, we're so committed to our communities that most of us start doing the work without a salary. And we do things for free, or we grab food from our fridges, or we bring things from other things. So start to stop thinking that way and think of your organization or your program as a well-functioning and budgeted operation. No matter how small or how big it is not charity. It is not only based on solidarity. You are doing good, but for that, this is a functioning and budgeted organization or operation or program in order for you to be successful at serving others. Number three is moving from that scarcity mindset of like, my application needs to be the best, or I need to get this 10K because this other organization is doing the same thing. We encourage you to stop thinking that way and to start thinking of yourself in the arena or the sector that you're playing as a ringleader mindset, right? So if there are other 5 organizations doing similar work, great, mention them, right? In your fundraising strategies, in your grants, and you say, these people are doing this, right? This is the great work, and this is the gap that we are filling, or this is what we would like to do in collaboration with them, right? So that you stop thinking of yourself as a competitor and you think of yourself as a ringleader in the arena, right? If they get it, the people get it. If you get it, everybody gets it as well, as we're working towards that same outcome. Moving forward, as I was saying at the beginning, let's start thinking that we're not soliciting funders, right? We're not knocking on their doors for them to let us in, but we're actually on the hunt. We are recruiting investors that are going to believe in my cause, that are going to believe in what is it that I'm doing. So you also get the chance and the opportunity to select them and decide who gets to invest in your cause. Moving forward, especially for those nonprofits that are small in the room, for you to stop thinking of yourself as a program leader and start thinking of yourself as an institutional leader, right? So that you're not, especially those of us who started as teachers or that started just like leading one small thing, for you to stop thinking that this is the only program that you're leading, but you're running, as I was saying at the beginning, a budgeted program, a budgeted organization that needs a leader that is not only serving the community, but rallying locals around it, recruiting investors around it, managing volunteers around it, so that you can start forcing yourself or encouraging yourself to think bigger, so that you're not only thinking, how do I replicate this program again this year, but how do we need less of this program next year? And how do we empower the people that we're working with so that we can start thinking of bigger and bigger solutions to solve some of the causes of the problems that you're trying to solve. On that note, right, which is a little like contradictory because then balance is important. I'm encouraging you to feel like you're an institutional leader without the entitlement of it, right? Even when people give you money and even when you are winning a lot, gratitude is key. Even if that's $100 gift or $100K gift, gratitude matters. Everywhere in the world, I would say, but in the United States especially, right? People really appreciate for you to be grateful in your attitude and in the way you show that appreciation, right? Sending notes, whatever the bylaws of your organizations allow, right? If you want to send gifts, if you want to send pictures of the work, there are small things and small token of appreciation that you can share with your funders. And believe it or not, that goes a long way, especially with corporate funders that are not used to that, right? If you have to apply through a system and you're just one of the others that apply, an email that you send like, thank you so much, we just received this, I appreciate you, the person, right, that made this possible, that really, really goes a long way. And then last but not least, which is my favorite, is how do we stop thinking that rejection is bad and that rejection is actually an act of leadership? Because if we're getting no's, it means that we might be trying things that are too big for us right now, but we're trying anyway. If we're getting no's and we ask for feedback, we're learning from that. So all of a sudden, instead of me being afraid of getting a no from this funder, I'm like, I'm going to go for it, right? This gift might be too big. They might not like this. I might not be too aligned to their priorities. So see rejection as an act of leadership because you dared, because you're exploring, because you're trying. And therefore that no is not going to destroy you, but it's actually going to be informing of the work and of the things that you're going to be doing next. So if I get to summarize it, right? We talked about the awkwardness and how anxious money makes us feel. Remember that other people's money is not free as well, right? So in that being that institutional leader, and in being grateful, in seeking or trying to recruit more funders, sometimes we lose ourselves in the money and what money can do. So my last reminder here is that money is not free to you. And there are ways in which you can also start thinking about it, right? So if we focus on the column on the left, I want you to think once in a while on the risks that the money that you receive can bring. So first of all, are you clear on what they want in return, right? Some organizations can give you $10,000, but then what they want in return is that you send weekly check-ins, that you send monthly reports, that you draft all these things. And if you're a team of one or a team of three, they might give you 10K, but it might cost you 20 to keep up with the reporting, for example. So we need to be very clear on what they want in return for that money, for us to be mindful, like, is this actually going to be helpful or not to our organization? Do I take it or not? Secondly, what rights and decision-making do they expect in return? That this applies more on individual donors. How much do they want to say and do for your organization? Sometimes you do want and need the help. Sometimes you don't. So you need to be very mindful of not only understanding that, but being clear with them as well, how much they can do. So that brings me to that other point, right? Do they cause you liability? Do they cause you a headache because they want to talk to you every single day? Are they going to be a mission creep, right? Are they going to start shifting our why and what is it that we do? And then the last one is related to what I was saying, right? What percentage of your future earnings do they steal from you? Would you get there without them? So these are some of the things that we want you to start asking yourselves before you ask for money, or as you ask for money. On the other hand, right, because we don't want to be in alert all the time, there are a few rewards that you can get with that money gift, right? There's other things aside from the money that you can get from your investors or your donors, however you want to call them. So can you earn revenue to fuel your growth, and not only financial revenue, but perhaps with their in-kind work, they can get you to get more dollars with the dollars that they gave you, right? And this, to give you a concrete example, it could be matching dollars, right? If someone tells you, I'm going to give you 10K, but I want you to match them, then you can leverage those 10K to try to find and get more money. Some investors and some donors, like American Express, for example, if they get to give you a gift, they also offer you volunteer staff. So can you cut costs or narrow focus to fuel growth because of this money that you're receiving? Perhaps, right? Because if Amex gives you some, I don't know, accountants, for example, as volunteers, maybe that will cut some of your costs. So aside from that financial gift, you are cutting some of your other costs. So that's extra money or income that you can see. Then can you secure recurring gifts or passive income, right? Related to what I was saying. And last but not least, can you find investors who don't just give the money, but become revenue and opportunity creators for you, right? Because they will connect you to your friends. They will be doing all of the other things. Once they believe in you and your cause, they will write a check, but they will also do other things for you. So I know that was a lot in terms of, I'm hoping that some of these blew your mind a little bit. So let me pause here before we go into skill set. And if you can send me some emojis in the chat here, like if you're good and you want me to keep going, thumbs up. If you need a pause, show me a hand and maybe we can make some room for questions. If we blew your mind, share that emoji. Tell me, how are we doing? Okay, I see party emojis, thumbs up. Okay, taking notes. Hearts. Okay, it seems that it's good signs, right? So we wanted to share some of these mindset tips that is easier said than done, right? Because we bring our own thinking, but also the nonprofit ecosystem has historically not only thought a certain way, but is perceived a certain way, right? So some of these things might clash with some of the beliefs that we have. So write down the ones that help you, work on the ones that you think you need to work on, and keep working on that mindset. So as I said at the beginning, we need to work on mindset, right? And how we feel and how we think about money. Then we need to have the right skill set for us to fundraise accordingly. And the way we define it at Radical Partners is that skill set is a combination of having your budget in place, having the right pipeline on how you will get that money, and then last but not least, knowing how to track your money and having systems and processes that are going to allow you to track that money for the health of your program and your organization, but also for the health of that relationship with your donors so that you can report easily and you can say and share where the money has been spent and what it was spent for. So I'm going to get nerdy starting from now. And we're going to talk about budget. So this is where we want to start having your spreadsheet handy because the slides have screenshots. You're not going to be able to read much in the slides because you have them in the Excel sheets, right? So if you want to go to Excel sheets, you can and just hear my voice as we walk you through them, right? So I think every organization has or should have two kinds of budgets, right? So let me start with this operational budget. Thinking, like pushing you to think from a programmatic leader to an institutional leader, you should have an operational budget, at least on a yearly basis. What do I mean by this? If you look all the way down in that operational budget, this is where we have our program costs, right? So let's say you run one program, two programs, 10, 15 programs, each of those programs should have their budget. But aside from that, there are operational costs that are larger or bigger than your programs, right? So to give you some examples here, we have, what are my personnel costs? What are my contractors' costs? Like, am I paying fundraisers? Am I paying accountants? Am I paying lawyers for certain things? Then I bet you have a bunch of administrative costs, right? Do we talk about gas? Do we talk about internet? Do we talk about any platforms that we're paying online? Do we have any fixed costs, right? If we have a line of credit or if we have something that we need to pay on a fixed basis every year, we have that line item. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, we have the program costs. So this, you will see an operational budget template in that spreadsheet. And Katie, that's a great question, right? She's asking, are the program costs in addition to the personal costs, or personal cost embedded into the program costs, right? I think all of those things are a possibility. In our case, we have them separate, because our personnel is not only dedicated to one program. Our personnel is dedicated, for example, Luisana is managing 3-4 programs at the same time, right? So what I do is, at my operational level, I estimate her salary, and then my program costs are just more materials and things that I'm going to spend on for the program. But when I fundraise for the program, I divide Luisana's salary per program, right? So if it's OFB, we will charge for 20% of Luisana's salary. If it's the 10 days of connection, we will budget 20% of Luisana's salary. So all these programs in addition are going to make Luisana's salary, right? So for the operational costs, I would encourage you to have your personal costs separate and then your program costs separate, because you're going to have to pay that person no matter what. But when it comes to programs, this is where you can decide, do I buy a cheese board at Publix or do I pay for a catering service, right? So I would encourage you to think of program as separate and leave personnel, because you do want to keep the person separate from what you're going to spend on programmatic dollars. Yeah. And Fernanda, who I don't want to put you on the spot, right, Fer, but she used to be a funder for a while, and she's strongly encouraging us to have personnel across several programs for sustainability. So I think that's a good segue to the next budget. Because it might look like, to follow my advice and to follow Fernanda's advice, it might look like we're duplicating the budgets, right? And we are, in a way, because you will need both. You need the operational dollars to understand how much money you need per year. But then when you're fundraising for a particular program, you see that in here we have staff salary and wages again, right? Because then we oftentimes budget for all the things that we're going to spend, as I was saying, in the operational budget, and we don't estimate how much money we're going to need to pay for the people that are going to run that, right? So the way I think about it is, operational is this big budget that I have, and then the program cost is zooming into that operational budget. So this is where I, again, budget for how much I need for people, and then all the costs. Is that clear enough, or should I try to say it in a different way?
I guess I'll just talk. Do you recommend starting with the program budget and then building out the operational budget after that, or vice versa?
I would say, assuming on all the organizations here, I would encourage you to start programmatically and then go up.
Okay.
Because sometimes we don't even know what programs cost.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So I would encourage all of us to know how much money each of our programs cost, and then identify other expenses that are not into our programmatic expenses, right? It's going to be a very healthy practice, because sometimes we run programs without knowing if we're running them at a loss, or how expensive they are, and if we're running them at a loss. And sometimes we might realize that some programs don't really cost us any money. So it's okay for us to keep doing them. So yes, I would encourage you to do programs first and then zoom out to the operational budget. So if that's the case, right, we start with programs, and then you see how you have that line item there as staff salary and budget. So when you move your program budgets to an operational one, this is where you can separate. These are going to be all my program costs, and I will decide to leave personnel separate. Then again, that's just a suggestion, right? If you want to leave your personnel inside the programmatic cost and just have separate, like other admin costs and the fixed costs, that's okay. It's a matter of not only style, but what works for you and what helps your brain think about how to fundraise. Yeah. Okay. So this is where we're going to start passing the baton to you, because we want you to spend some time thinking about what those line items or buckets are for you. So because of time, we would recommend that you choose your own adventure and you decide to play with your operational budget right now or a program budget. That's on you. And then whatever you decide, focus on that tab, right? So we're gonna give you some time to start building that operational budget or that program budget. And before we go there, for those of us who are newer on the budget side of things, I'm gonna give you some ideas. So if we go to the other slide, Lou, please. For some reason, can you refresh it? Because for some reason it's duplicating the image. I don't know why.
I'm refreshing. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. So I'll mention some, right? So program salaries and wages are key, and oftentimes we don't see that, and neither embedded in the programs nor in the operational budgets. And that includes yourself. If you are the founder, if you are the leader of organization, you should be budgeting for your salary. If you feel like we're not there yet, right, and you're not going to be able to fundraise for it, that's okay. You'll get there later, but you need to know how much the operation would cost, and that includes your salary when you're budgeting, right? Then are there any other administrative salaries and wages that you want to pay for? Can you hire consultants or contractors for a particular thing? Sometimes you need designers, sometimes you need grant writers. Do you want to start incorporating employee benefits, right? This is where healthcare goes, 401ks, stipends that you might provide to your staff, even if it's a meal once in a while, right? Add those as employee benefits or employee costs, professional development, etc. Are you traveling, right? Tickets, gas, parking, supplies, materials. Are you paying rent? If you're working from home, like, is the organization then benefiting from the rent that you paid personally? Other utilities, insurance, legal fees, accounting fees, taxes, printing and publications, even postage, mailing and shipping, right? That it's $150 every time you send something, but are you sending thank you notes to 500 people each year? Then that makes it into 500 and plus in your budget. Marketing, fundraising, we can even go all the way to depreciation of the materials that you have. So we're going to leave that slide. If you want to move forward a little bit, Lou, where we have the budget line items a little more. I think it's like 3 more there. We're going to leave that up, and we're going to give you 5 minutes just for you to decide what those buckets or line items would be, right? So if you look at the template, the buckets or the big line items that we're talking about is we have them grouped by personnel, by contractors, by program costs, etc. And then we have the line items. So right now, we just want you to start thinking or listing out what are all those things that you're spending money on at a programmatic level or an operational level. So we're going to play some music. We're going to give you 2 songs just to think of that. Don't think of the numbers just yet. Just think of the categories. And then if you have any questions, we're going to be here in the chat answering them so that we can respect people's time playing with that.
Dejo caer ella arena, suspira. Dejo saber en mis labios su ser. Nos probamos la noche, suave mundo de mi vida. Fuimos casi un mundo, casi viento, casi sal. Fuimos casi nada y todo de una sola vez. Todo de una sola vez. Los dedos iban tanteando entre piel y piel. Era el reconocimiento de su nombre y fuimos casi un mundo, casi viento, casi sal. Fuimos casi nada y todo de una sola vez, de una sola vez, de una sola vez. Nos quedamos ahí sacando el mar en nuestro barrio. Y nos quedamos ahí con la certeza de estar enredados en el terreno y nos encontramos. Los celos iban tanteando entre piel y piel. Era el reconocimiento de sudores de su nombre y fuimos casi un muro, casi viento, casi sal. Fuimos casi nada y todo de una sola vez, de una sola vez, de una sola vez. Nos quedamos ahí como
Okay, I'm loving all those thinking faces. Is anybody compelled to share how that was for you. Andrea, we hear you.
I think it was first intimidating because numbers, lines, and budget, anxiety, but connecting it back to the strategy planning, it was essentially it helped kind of ground the okay, what's happening throughout the program, what is it that we need, and then also just like what happened last year with the program, what was it that we added and things like that. So it really kind of regrounded in the strategy of it all, and helped kind of just fill the gaps. And it really just showed that a lot of this stuff, I didn't need to add more. I just needed to add maybe one more line because I wasn't sure if the space and venue were something that went with supplies and materials, but considering that it was, that in itself was a whole thing to focus on. But yeah, it felt grounding.
I'm glad. And what you're making me think, Andrea, is that I see some founders in the room, I see some executive directors in the room, but then I see also some programmatic staff in the room, right? So I think it's worth making the distinction that some of you might not have hands in the operational budget, and that's okay. Some of you might not have a decision-making power on the programmatic budget. But even when the budget is handed to you, right, and they tell you, you have $15,000 for this program, to run this program, you can do your mini budget, right? Like, what am I going to do with this $15,000? So no matter your role and your position in the organization, this is a good practice that you should do with either finding out how much money you need or what will you do with the money that you were given, in a way. So I'm glad to hear, Andrea, that you kind of validated what you and Pauline are doing over there. So now it's time to talk about numbers. So in that same spreadsheet, right, whether you decided to go for the operational budget or the program budget, you will see that now that we have this first column, right, the item column, the bucket column, the priorities column, however you want to call it, we have some columns that are going to go a layer deeper on what those things are, right? That is a description, a subtitle in there. And then as we go right, you will see that we have two columns there, a lean column and an ideal column. So Lou, if you can move us through, or let's stay in the Excel document instead, sorry. So if you follow me into either the OB sample or the PB sample at the operational level or at the programmatic level, you see that we basically go through the exercise of understanding what our costs are, right? How much money do we think we need? If you go to the OB sample, Lou, please. There. So if we scroll up, you will focus on the lean budget, right? This is an example of like, okay, how much money do we need based on the contracts that we have signed with people, on the programs that we've run before, etc. This is what we typically think that's going to be the cost of the year ahead for us. So we go through that exercise and then we push ourselves to think, what if we would get more, right? What if we would go for more? So you see significantly salary increases in there, for example, right? Instead of paying people $40K for the coordinator role, can we increase their salary to $50K? And we go that way in everything. Like some of the things that I like to inflate a little bit more are the things that I think the least of. For example, fundraising, professional development for my team, travel, right? So that we have opportunities to go to conferences, etc. This is where I inflate the cost a little bit more. And it serves as a way of like, okay, first we need to fundraise for this, right? Because this is literally what we need, but let's aim for more. So when I present my budgets to funders, I present the ideal budgets, right? Like this is how much I want to pay my staff. This is how much this program will cost. because I think we should go there, right, in that abundance mindset. But it pushes us to think bigger. And when we get the lower sum, it gives us that sense of like, we did it, it's successful, and now how can we think of growing and scaling the organization, right? Which is oftentimes something that we see in the for-profit world, and we don't necessarily think in the nonprofit world. So I go back to the cheese tray from Publix, right? Like, and we could think of materials, for example. If you're supporting kids with supplies and materials for school, yes, maybe a bag with materials could cost you $50, but can you then next year give them a bag with wheels that is going to protect their back, right? So you can start thinking of like, what if I get more, and what when I get more. So we encourage you to have this lean and this ideal budget at the operational level and at the programmatic level. So we're going to give you some time to start playing with those numbers, right? For those of you who have numbers from the years past, I would encourage you to think of the ideal budget for 2024. For those of you who don't have the numbers at hand, you will have to spend some time going back to last year or the last few months to understand how much you've been spending, so that you can start building those numbers. Fer, do you have a tip for us or a question for me?
No, I have a question. How much time do you spend coming up with like as real a number you can? Like, let's say you don't have history. So let's say, for example, I don't know, making it up, travel. How much time do you actually spend thinking about like the actual cost versus like, I'm just going to guess it's going to be 3,000 for the year? Or a consultant, like let's say you need you know you're going to need a consultant for event planning or event. How much time do you actually go, maybe seeing how much it's actually going to cost, getting quotes from vendors so you can create as realistic a budget versus just guessing or estimating?
Yeah, I would say that you should at least spend an hour doing it. And depending on where you are, that looks different, right? So for example, if you don't have any idea, I would say bring the team together for an hour to come up with those numbers, right? Like, where did we travel last year? How much did we spend on this? And gain knowledge from whomever you're working with, but like spend that hour brainstorming about it. If you don't have a team and nobody has knowledge, I would spend that hour researching and benchmarking on other organizational budgets, right? 990s are publicly available. So I would choose an organization that you admire or that you really like how they play, how happy their staff looks like, etc. And I would leverage their reporting to budget yours. So spending that hour researching, and then if after doing that, right, either talking to people or researching, you don't have the number, then you can guess based on your own personal knowledge. But I would do the guessing as a last resort, and spend at least an hour. And I don't think I would spend more than that, because then you're making it up, right? So I would say, yeah, budget less, start doing, and then say, okay, I'm going to evaluate what I'm going to do in the next quarter. And then at the end of the quarter, then I'm going to go back to my budget and see how much I spent.
And then can I have one more question? So let's say you want to grow, you want to scale your organization, you want to bring in additional staff, and you let the fundraise for that year, you're successful. I mean, how much are you thinking about the sustainability of that staff position, right? So is this like an annual, how often should you be revisiting the budget to make sure that, okay, you were able to bring in more money and you were able to bring in more staff, but that you're also thinking about how you're going to maintain the new staff that you brought in?
Yeah, so I promise I will answer your question at the end, because I have a slide for that.
Okay.
But I think that the helpful thing to share right now is that if you want to hire that person, or when you want to hire that person, you need to be very clear on what the role will be and how will that affect your budget, in the sense that if this person is going to be fully dedicated to programmatic stuff, then that means that your time will be alleviated and then you get to fundraise more, right?
Right. Right.
still going to be involved in programmatic stuff, then this person needs to spend some time in fundraising, right? So when we budget, we not only think how much do we need to spend on this person, but what is this person going to allow to bring in, right? Either because of they're going to be doing some fundraising or efforts, or because they're going to allow you to do that, right? So there's always this interesting balance of like making the investment, and it's an investment because it's a risk that in a year you need to raise for that. So I would budget the risk, but also budget the time to make sure that you're going to bring in money for the following year.
Yeah.
But I'll respond on the timing thing later. So we're going to give you another song just to start playing with the numbers. And remember, we're playing here, right? So if you have numbers from last year, great. You can keep building your program budget or your operational budget. And if you haven't, start making those numbers up, as Fernanda was saying, based on what you know, etc. We just want you to get familiar with the format, and then you can do this on your own. I do, Aileen. The way at RP we budget for things is that when we have a line item for a particular person, we have the bulk number that what that person would cost us. So it's not just their salary, it's the benefits, 401k, taxes, all of the things that you're going to be able to incur as an employer.
Thank you.
Pasan las noches y llega la intriga sin saber quién confía. Aquí comienza la improvisación. No te distraigas de más. Paso al patrón. Mientras ellas sueñen gigante. Cuando vuelves, el juego cambió. Al salir, armando ya tu propio juego.
I would say yes, Rosemary. Because if they're just managing your social media and you're not paying them on your payroll, I would budget them as contractors. Okay. So we're gonna keep moving to keep giving you resources and things to play with. This brings us kind of like to the end of that budgeting section, right? So if I would get to summarize, we're encouraging you to have your program budgets and then do your operational budget. And what that means is that you define your expenses, you assign how much that will cost and how much you need. And when you do that, you have an ideal budget to keep growing. So out of those things that we just shared with you, the tools that we shared with you, and the concepts that we shared with you, do you have any pressing questions?
I do actually. We have funding generated for projects. So when we do a budget, we're comfortable with that, but we don't generally have funding for personnel. If we put that amount in, then our budget will be negative. Is that something that we should be doing? I'm not sure how to handle that.
Yes, because how are all of you, like, who runs the program?
Me and my co-founder.
Okay, and how are you gonna be able to run the program if you're not having money to pay for your food, your rent, etc.?
Right. We don't have sufficient, we honestly don't have sufficient. So we pay ourselves for like, oh, we produce and host, but we're not able to pay ourselves like, say, a salary throughout the year. But we should. So we're not sure when we're doing these applications, should we be putting in like the amount that we don't have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because remember that a budget is that, right? It's a projection of how much money you will need. So your salaries definitely need to go there because the programs are dependent on you. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, like, it's okay if you cannot fundraise entirely for your salary right now. That's the reality of many of us, but at least you need to know how much money you need, right? Or else you're just gonna be asking for 10K, 15K every year. And then you're figuring out how to pay for this, right? This is your job. For some of us, it's our secondary thing, and that's okay until you're ready. But this is the decision that we made with our professions. And just like any other professional, we should be compensated for what we're doing. So yes, even though it's negative for now, I would encourage you to keep it there as for you to know where you're headed.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see what Pauline is saying. When including health benefits of personnel by team member, are you averaging out the premium and then? I think you can play with an average, Pauline, especially if your team is growing, right? It might be hard to say 250, 255, 256. I would average it so that, and I would either average it or go with the higher rate. Because then the higher your budget, then you will fundraise for it. And then if you have some extra dollars at the end of the year, that wouldn't hurt. And then Rosemary, you're asking about your fundraising event as part of your operational budget. I would say if it's an event that you are running every year and therefore you have assigned staff to it, and that you know that it's part of your programs, basically, I would add it. Now, if you don't know if you're going to host this fundraising event, etc., I would leave the line item for the event as a programmatic cost, as a program that you might run or that you might not run, and that it might be depending on you getting money to do the event. So it depends on your case if you leave it as a fixed thing or not. Let me see, when we increase the amount for pay. Yeah, so that also happens, Chantel. So it's important for you to have your budget. And then these are some of the techniques that we're going to give you on the following workshop, because you need to know what the funder is willing to pay for, right? Some funders are very interested in the sustainability of the organization and personnel. So they might fund that, right? We have people that literally just pay for salaries, while others say, I want to see where my dollars are going to. So we tell them, okay, you're going to be paying for this event, you're going to be paying for food. So I break down my programmatic cost. I tell them this is how much it will cost me, but I'm only asking you for these program costs, right? So for that, you need to do a little research on who you're asking for what. The nice thing is that I would say that the philanthropic sector is moving away from what you were saying, Chantal, because they're realizing how come we're paying for programs that we're not paying for the people that are running the programs. So more and more people are not only paying for staff, but for admin costs and general operating dollars, right? So hopefully you will see more of that. But while we get there, you can basically have a full menu and you just tell them, this is what I would love for you to have. And no, you can pay yourself when you're a nonprofit, Chantel. Like nonprofits have employees and can pay for salaries, and that would include you in the equation. Yeah, that's somewhat of a misconception that we have. So if you have an accountant or a lawyer, you can ask them how to do that. If you don't, as part of the things that Luisana was sharing at the beginning, we have an accountant and a lawyer available as part of these office hours for free that we're offering. So you can leverage Jess or Ben to ask those questions on how to start paying yourself. Okay, I'm gonna move us forward because Luisana is giving me the timing eye. So I'm gonna rush through this, right? Because one element is understanding how much money you need for what, right? So, all right, we just designed that ideal budget. Now, we basically need to do the same thing to figure out where the money is coming from, right? So we call that a pipeline. So you have that tab there, and it basically looks as a spreadsheet as well, similar to a budget, but we figure out, okay, where is this money coming from? So if we move to the right, Lou, so we can skip through that. We'll talk about radical partners, but then here you can see that in the left column, we say, okay, we apply to 3 grants or 4 grants, right? One is for 40, one is for 45, the other one is for 15. Then Radical Partners has a hybrid model. So we do have some paid services, right? So we have consultancy there. And then we track what the status is, right? Did we submit? Are we waiting for a response? What's the status of that? And then once it's accepted, or if it was rejected, or if we're waiting for a response, then all the way to the right, we know how much they gave us, if they gave us, right? So to your point, Chantel, sometimes we ask for 40 and they give us 3. It has literally happened. So it's important to track not only how much money we have in asks, right, for that pipeline, but how did we get? And all the way down, you will see that we have our program budget there, which was 137 for this one. But based on the money that we received, we still have a 60K grant. So this indicates the gap that we have, and it tells us, like, do we run the program? Do we need to fundraise like crazy to run the program? Do we do it at a loss? And to be fully transparent, that happens to us with the 10 days of connection every year, that we have an ideal budget of over 100K, and we fundraise half of it, and we still make the decision that we're going to run the program because we think that the community needs this program to connect locals across lines of difference, but we know that we're running it at a loss, right? So therefore, Radical Partners is making an investment in the program, and we say that when we fundraise. It's like we're looking for fundraisers to match us on the other half of the program, right? So it's better to know, even if when the numbers are red, as you were saying, G, so that you can operate accordingly in the future, right? Either to fundraise more, to ditch the program eventually, or to still do it despite that, right? So you will see that tab there. Once you budget, we suggest that you create your pipeline. And the last thing that we want to share with you is, once you know how much money you need, where it's coming from, how to track it. But to give you some hope, Lou, I know that you have a couple of slides that you want to share with them in terms of how to fundraise and how to build this pipeline.
Yes, so this is a shameless plug as well for our partners at the Miami Foundation. There are 2 opportunities that you can leverage from the Miami Foundation itself to help you track and to help you get to those dollars that you already assigned. So you can leverage any of the Give Miami Day resources hub office hours in order for you to, like, you already know what the money that you need. So this resources is going to help you to make the ask, right? How you can maximize your fundraising strategy for Give Miami Day. And the second one, it's an opportunity for the Miami Open for Business, which is the ABLE loan. This is also a low interest loan available for nonprofits in order for you to buy assets. So you can find more information. I'm also going to make sure to give you all of this information via email into like which ones are the eligibility for the loan and what can you apply for the loan. But this is also an opportunity that you can leverage from the Miami Open for Business. So again, I'll make sure to send you both of this information via email. But these are also resources that you have available as an organization, right? And for you to maximize your pipeline in your fundraising strategy.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer some of the questions that I see here. Tanya, there are healthy organizations that don't operate in red. And this is where we go back to the mindset, right? Most of the nonprofits start out of passion and out of someone with a similar lived experience. So we just do what we got to do so that others don't go through what we went, despite not having enough money. So we need to do what happens in the for-profit world, right? We need to understand about management. We need to understand about growth. We need to budget and fundraise for it. So eventually you will get to that place, Tanya, in which you understand how much money you need, how much do you get, are you trying to get? And then this leads me to Katie's question of like, what happens if I fundraise for some, but I didn't get enough? I want to share two things there. One is when you perceive yourself as an institutional leader and you think of that operational budget, I would say that it's okay if a program doesn't cover for itself until you get to a healthy spot, but the money has to come from somewhere, right? So if this program is not making enough to sustain itself, how are we leveraging Give Miami Day, for example, as a complement to that? Are we, I don't know, asking people donations in exchange of swag or something, depending on what your bylaws suggest, right? When we look at the WWF, they sell teddy bears and calendars in exchange of a donation, right? Like, can you come up with other things that are then going to complement what you're missing so that you're able to run it? That's what I would say would be an ideal practice, and that any healthy organization does it. Now, there are moments in which you just can't make it, right? I remember it happened to us once, that it wasn't just about the money. It was kind of like the program wasn't relevant enough anymore. So we went back to the funder, right? And we said, hey, we are thankful that you gave us this. We're not going to run this program because of X, Y, Z. Do you want us to give the money back? And they said, no, like, we appreciate that you're being completely honest. We appreciate that this is happening. Let's redirect the dollars for XYZ, right? So going back to the mindset and going back to dating, if you're authentic, if you're honest, oftentimes funders help you find ways in which you can figure out how to do it. Luisana had a recent experience that we said that we were going to spend 5K on something, and we only spent 4,700 something. So we had 250 left. So we went back to the funder like, hey, we have this. Do you want it back? And they're like, no, you could apply it to these other expense, right? So we came with a solution, and they said like, no, it's okay. You can keep it and reassign it to this. So if you're honest and authentic, oftentimes you can find solutions there. Which is why the third part is super important, which is tracking your money, right? So you also have a tracker there, which helps everybody involved. In this tracker, again, you can't really see it here, but you can see in the Excel sheet. This is an example of a program. So in a program, we have our budget, which is all the way to the left. And then you start adding columns on like, okay, for example, if I had JP Morgan giving me 50K for this program, and then I had FedEx giving me 10K for this program, I start adding those mini budgets, right? Going back to your question about how do you sell this to funders, right? Funders oftentimes don't fund the whole program. They're just going to budget chunks. So this is where we know, okay, 50 are coming from here, 70 are coming from here, 10 are coming from here. So we keep track of every single thing that we spent on that particular line item and on that particular grant, right? So for example, if we have the events line item and my budget was 15K, but I told JP Morgan that I was going to use 5 from them, and I told FedEx that I was going to use 2 for them, I track all of that on a regular basis so that at the end, you see in the last line column of the totals, I know how much money of the money I budgeted I've been spending and how much I have available to it. So for those, we don't really have time to work on them, but we wanted to make sure that you're not only thinking of like, how much do I need? Where is it coming from? And then how you're tracking that. And this is where I'm going to pause and try to summarize everything for you so that you can just grab whatever you need and run with whatever you need. So we strongly suggest this timeline. You should be budgeting at least once a year. If you're the CEO of the organization, the executive director of the organization, or a program leader, you should be budgeting at least once a year, ideally at the end of the year before, right? Or if the latest in January of that year, so that you know what's coming ahead. When it comes to the pipeline, you should review that pipeline at least once a quarter. Because you can have all these beautiful goals, but if you raised almost nothing in quarter one, you're going to have to increase that pipeline in quarter two. The opposite could happen, that you thought that we were going to raise less in quarter one, and if you raised more, then you know that in quarter two, you can relax a little bit, right? So you should be reviewing that pipeline and updating that pipeline on a quarterly basis. The tracking needs to happen monthly. By you, by a staff member, by an accountant, because if you don't, yes, you can do it later, but it's going to absorb your time and your brain of you trying to figure out how much you spend, where is that receipt, etc. So we strongly encourage you for you to keep the house in order on a monthly basis. No matter how small or big your team is, you should be doing this on a monthly basis. And then last but not least, that mindset that I told you at the beginning, that's something that we have to keep working on a daily basis. So if I would get to summarize, like this is the best practice that we can give you here: budget once a year, pipeline once a quarter, track your dollars in and out on a monthly basis, and keep working on your mindset and that culture daily. We are very well aware that that was a lot, right? Trying to give something to everybody. So do not fret. You see Luisana here on the call, and then Itza here, who's our operations manager, and they are part of the menu in the office hours that are available to you. Luisana is amazing at programmatic budgeting, running so many programs at the same time with so many funders at the same time. And then Itza is more on the operational side of Radical Partners. So if you want a more like an organizational bird view, Itza is your person, so you can book them on the website. So that's everything that I have for you. I'd be more than happy to stay here for a while if you have any pressing questions, because we ate some of the time, and I want to make sure that Lou has a few minutes to wrap it all up. Thank you so much for paying attention and staying as we explored all these things together.